Blackboard, please. Some of you I see are already there. So with a show of hands, how are the teams going? This is one thing we're going to talk about. Did I say good or bad? So how many think your teams are going okay? Raise your hand. Okay or above. How many are going, I'm in a team? So we're going to do some additional team activities, and I've revised the due date just a little bit. So your original project to do the charter, working your way backwards, I am actually going to have due on Tuesday the 8th. If I have my dates right. Tuesday the 8th is the day after you have a day off. I am also going to give you that date until midnight, and we will have that day in class as a work day also. Does that make sense? All right. So we've got some other group stuff I want to do and a couple of things I'm going to try. So bear with me today. We've got a lot to cover and a lot of hopefully interesting things to do. One of them we're going to start in on is we are going to try something new. You guys are going to be at the cusp of a new revolution. I said we could get Microsoft Office or Microsoft Project and that I could give it to you for free. And that's true. Except that Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, has two different ways to install software. They have what they call their click to run, and they have their installer file version. What I can give you is the installer file version, and guess what? They're not compatible. Leave it to a company like Microsoft to make two products not compatible with each other. If you try to install it, it pops up and says, hey, to install this, you're going to have to uninstall Office 365 or Office 2016. Not really a great way to go. In addition, the cost of it has pushed a lot of companies that could use project management software to looking at other alternatives. And you've probably seen ads for things like Monday.com. Has anybody seen Monday.com? An ad for it? At least one or two of you have. That is also a project management tool. And what they are based on is that idea of we're putting software as a service, SaaS or SaaS, or you can think about they're doing software out in the cloud. You're leasing it per month per individual that's using it. Well, Microsoft is also doing something similar with Microsoft Project. You can get Microsoft Office now in the cloud, and they're generously giving us about a 2-week trial of it, but 2 weeks really doesn't give us enough time. If we had to make you buy the Office product, which is stupid because I could give you the free one except Microsoft doesn't like itself, they're charging $30 per month per user for their online project, for the basic version. Well, that doesn't sound that bad until you run the numbers. And say you had a company with 50 employees, they all needed this tool, it can get expensive very fast. Well, I am a big fan of something called the open source efforts of companies. Now, that does not mean that they are making these products necessarily entirely for free, but they are making these products more affordable. And we're going to go look at them. Sometimes they are free. If you don't need the support, so as an individual you don't need the support, and a lot of companies have some built-in support, you can actually get some products very, very reasonably cost. So, what I'm going to have you do, and we're going to try it on these computers in here, so you guys are going to get to install it in here. You might also want to try it on your own computer. You guys are my test guinea pigs in here to see if we can make this work. So, there is a project, and the project is called Project Libra. I will show you where it's at and what it looks like and give you an oversight here. So let me pull up in the proper tool window here, which I have somewhere. You mean send out. Hang on. Yes. So if you want to install it, yes, it's on our DreamSpark program, which you guys are automatically enrolled in. It's now Azure Web Tools for Development. I'll send out the link and show you guys where it's at. We purchased it, and you can get some other pieces out of it fairly reasonable, including Windows 10 and some other software. But they've changed their focus because they're really focusing on the cloud. Microsoft is, and they'd like to do some things with that. So this is Project Libre. So it's projectlibre.com. So their eventual model is they are going to have Project Libre Cloud. We don't know the pricing on that yet, and I'm hoping that they'll have an educational piece because I think there would be a lot of advantage to it. The advantage to that is the collaboration and those pieces. However, they have what they call their community edition. In other words, it's community supported. You can't call them and get any support. These guys have made an effort to try to create a product. Now they're migrating to the cloud, and they're going to monetize it. The eventual goal is they want to make some money. They don't want to probably make Bill Gates kind of money, but they want to make enough to support this project. So over here on this download, you can click and download this software. It's not very big. So we're going to have you click and go download and install this software. I have not tested it on every configuration known to man. However, there is a Linux version, there is a Mac version, and when it links, what it links to is something called SourceForge. That's not spam, it's actually a really great site. And you can pick several different options. I'm going to just click download because we are typically in here on Windows machines. There are options again for the Mac and other options. So I'm going to click download. It does take a second to start, and then it will download. And in this case, it's going to take about 40 seconds. It's a pretty small product compared to Microsoft Project. What we are going to do is our book equips us with a lot of files to use with Microsoft Project starting in the next couple of weeks. So I want to get us ahead and have this tool available, and we're going to see if we can make it work. If I'm a company and you just walk into your boss and say, well, I'm going to save you guys $1,000 a person for a license for Microsoft Project, and this would do everything you need, you've probably just become the hero in that community. And it can also be used for a lot of other things other than traditional formal projects. So mine says it's installed or it's downloaded. Once it's downloaded, I'm going to click to install it really quickly. And it'll pop over the user account control and say, do I really want to? And I'm just going to take the typical defaults. Now, mine errored out because I've already got LibreOffice on there. You can just hit the defaults and finish the installation. So I was playing around with it here in the lab to make sure that it would actually work. So when it installs, it looks like that. So does it look as clean and neat and fancy as Microsoft Project? No. But we're going to look at it and hopefully we can do what we need to for this class. It will do, I'm going to guess, about 85 to 90% of what Microsoft Project will do, which is probably good since we're going to do about 10 to 20% of what Microsoft Project can do in here in the extended one class. So when you get this installed, I want you to just let me know, raise your hand in the air. You just hold it there until you're done. So I want to see who's got some arm strength in their hand. All right. I'm kidding. You don't have to hold it that long. If you run into problems, let me know. We're going to get this installed. And then on Thursday, we're going to send you out some test files to look at, and we're going to see if those work. Oh, ready. All right. What are you running into? Is that the computer that's supposed to be on? Yeah. So somebody turned the monitors off for some reason. I'm not sure why they did that. And we'll just restart it. It was on earlier today. Now you can install it on the... There you go. All right. Again, there's versions for about everything. I won't guarantee they work on anything. So we're going out on a limb. I've tried it on a couple of different machines and different things, and it seems to work okay. I have not tried it on a Mac, and I don't have the latest version of Mac OS X. So if you're trying to use it on a Mac, you're kind of out on your own. But this is what we're going to look at, and it does. See if I have my other one up there. So this is what we're going to be able to create with it. If you remember back a little bit, we had those work tasks. We were breaking things down into those work breakdown structures, those tiny tasks. Well, this is the same thing, only now we've broken it down, we've given it duration, and we've created what's the most common thing we do in project management in terms of charting and graphing. This is called a Gantt chart. Has anybody seen a Gantt chart before? No, this is probably new for most of you. So this chart takes us over time, and it also has these tasks. And notice how some tasks start right after another one. Some are in parallel, so concurrent. This gives us some tools that we can plan out an entire project. We can find that critical path. We can do that network diagramming. We can see when our resources are overloaded. So some of you have been involved in projects and or other items, and suddenly you're like, man, I'm going to have to work 27 hours today to get this done. I'm overloaded. We can actually see how in a project those kinds of things work. So I think for what we're going to do, this will be a great tool, and you may want to use this for a lot of things. When you start breaking them up, it's a great way to do that. The classic example we use, and not to put anybody on the spot, but is anybody involved in a wedding planning here? You are. Oh. You're in 2 of them at the end of the year. So by our own definition, weddings fit the project modality. Is it unique? Yeah, every wedding is unique. And that's kind of one of our, and we can use tools like this to model out all the tasks. And what I will say is, as a man, and there are men in this class, does a wedding seem to just magically happen? Yeah, I thought so too. It doesn't. There's a lot of details and pieces and parts. And I got very lucky the first time I got married. I worked all over the country. My role in that was I got to pick the color of the tux, whether they wanted gray or black. I had no idea all the details behind the scene. Second time I got married, because the first one clearly didn't work very well. Second time I was involved in the planning, and I really wanted to just fly off and go get married somewhere and come back, because there's a lot of details. It's a project. Trying to plan that out, this is kind of that idea, that timeline over a time. In this case, we start and we know all the tasks, so we know when it's going to end. But as a wedding is a little different, because a wedding has a definite date. Well, until COVID, and then a lot of them changed. But if you're still planning what kind of wedding cake you want, and the wedding date is in 2 days, are you in trouble? Yeah. And so tools like this can be really, really useful in those kinds of stressful situations. So this is an example. This is that idea of a Gantt chart. This is not the only tool that can build them. You can build them in Excel if you really want to. I wouldn't recommend it if we have tools available that can do it. There are standalone Gantt chart generators. But this allows us then to make changes. I don't know if I've locked this one, so hang on a second. So if I change this description and suddenly it changes to 15 days, notice how that chart changes? But it also shows, we're in trouble on our timeline, right? So we're gonna look at this and show how these kind of tools can make your life a lot easier or more complicated. And we start with something like this. So we're going to get some practice and some involvement with that. So to show this, close that out. At the bottom of your week There are 2 Project Libre videos. I'm going to show one of them. I would encourage you to watch the other one. And I'm probably not going to make it all the way through this video because I'm not sure I'm going to have sound, quite frankly. Let me see if I can make sound happen. Oh, I can't. Okay. All right, so the one thing it really lacks, in my opinion, is it doesn't have all the handy-dandy tutorials and the help sections that Microsoft Project does. On Microsoft Project, it's got a question mark you can type in. It'll lead you to a lot of things. So it takes a little bit more hands-on, but it will do a lot of stuff. And I hope you've already seen some of the things like we could do in a project. We're not quite there yet, but I want to get you guys prepared for this particular thing. So there is a second video. So I did the intro. There is another one called Project Libra that he just released not too long ago. He goes in and does a couple of other things. Not a bad one to look at as we go through here. So this week we have a couple of things we need to do. The first thing I need you to do, go into 9-1 attend and put your chair number if you have not. So I know who is here and who is missing. And when they poll me and say who is here in class, and I say, here's the list. My email has been blown up lately by people getting either in quarantine, out of quarantine, off quarantine, maybe not in quarantine. We don't really know. All right, so we're going to start looking at these proposals. So as a group, you should be working on, you have that entire document, and now you're working backwards, and you're going to do the charter. From the charter, it becomes that idea of a proposal. So I've got everything in my charter that I think I need. Now I'm going to move to that next step. I want to get this funded. And that's kind of our key in this. So, what time is it? 2:32. Okay. Making sure I am somewhat on schedule. So there is another team assignment. So team assignment 1 is your project charter. That one is due the 8th on that Tuesday at midnight. Due this Sunday, we're going to have another case study. This one's out of your book, but you're going to do it as a group. So I want to give you guys an additional help with some groups. And this one we say, all right, here's a proposal. They looked at it. So they created an RFP. They sent it out. They got 3 proposals back is all they got. So you're looking at what went wrong with that. This, again, is a group assignment and when you read through there. So there are a list of 5 questions. So what could they have done? Should they consider a proposal? And finally, your last one is probably the biggest one of all. Your team must provide a decision as to which proposal to select. You must provide reasons. And here's where I'm going to say, let's think about a spreadsheet and maybe making data quantitative. What do I mean by that? How do I make data quantitative? Put numbers in it. And so I would like us to do in class today, we're going to work a little bit on how to make something quantitative. How many of you have been on a committee where you had to hire somebody? At least a couple of you. You're like, all right. So I want to think about this in terms of how do I quantitatively identify somebody. And so I need to blow that up so you guys can see it. Hang on a second. Easily enough done. So you guys are all on a hiring committee, and you have 3 people applying. That's a weird mix. You have a guy named Alex Jones, Rihanna showed up to get a job, and Madonna. Great. So how do I decide which one of them gets the job? And so this job is student recruitment at Peru. We need a student recruiter. All I know is those 3 names right now. What could I do to figure out who to hire? What do we typically do to hire somebody? We do an interview. All right. So in that interview, do we look for some specific things? So what might we look for? Dang it. Yes, I was actually. That's a really good catch. So what might I do in an interview? What might I look for? Do I just give them a score of 1 to 10 for how they interviewed? No. So we might want to break that down a little bit. So I'm going to do this. And this is actually a real world case. We do these things, not generally with these groups of people, but we know we're going to have interview, and we're going to ask specific things. So I might want to insert another line in here. But in that interview, we might look at how are they poised, or how is their attitude. Maybe we could say that. What other things might we look for in an interview? So leadership, that would be good. I will have an interesting one that I have added to some of our stuff we've done. Do they lie to you in an interview and you find out? Yep, like lying on the resume right to your face, or lying about some experience they've had. Now, lying I'm going to put up here, and I'm going to say minus points. Because we really don't like the idea that they're going to lie to us. But we've had that happen before. Is there anything else we want to put in that interview? So yeah, we might do an internet history. So we might do internet, and that is becoming something more common. We might look at their internet history. So maybe we have one for resume. And all of these we might say are from 1 to 10. And that can give us an objective score at the end. So, and we may put other things in there. But as an example, we looked at Alex Jones and his resume, and there were 12 misspellings in the first page of his resume. So out of a 1 to 10, what would we give him? Is it maybe a 2, 3, 1, 0? I'm going to say a 2, just because I've seen some really bad resumes. Rihanna, on the other hand, Rihanna must have paid somebody to write her resume, because it looks top-notch. I'm going to give her a 10 on it. That resume was on top quality paper. I know, which is weird in the internet world how they got it delivered, but she has a 10. But Donna, on the other hand, well, it was one page, and it left out some time elements, so I'm going to give her a 6 on the resume. And notice how I can start building then some quantitative pieces in here. So when I go through and I do that interview with them, and usually we've done this with all our candidates beforehand and tried to identify what strengths we need. And so one of the committees I've been on last year, and apparently will probably be on this year, nobody said I'm not, but we've been trying to find a new dean for our School of Professional Studies. And we actually had 60-some applicants. We had to go through all these criteria and try to weed it down to bring 3 or 4 onto campus and look at them. And what we ended up with, none of them, A, took the job, though we did offer it to one. And the second time, the pool of candidates was so bad, we actually said, you know what, let's walk away and start over again. Because that job is fairly important. Would you want a bad dean in there? No, they're very critical for how we succeed as a school. And we had a couple of people that they were at the kind of the middle of our choice, and that was as high as it rose. So we can use these objective tools to hopefully weed out things. So the same way when you're picking which one of your projects, I'm going to suggest you use those Excel skills and you put in things like cost overruns, experience. What other elements can I have in that project, and how can I weight them appropriately? So in this case, we might have that Mr. Jones, 9 on an attitude in his interview, 8. And we know Madonna's got some attitude, but not in the right way. Leadership. And then when we looked up internet history, oh my. We're going to find bad things on Rihanna's internet history. It depends on what you're looking for, right? So we're going to give her a 7. Madonna was before the internet, some of the things she did, so She's going to also get a 7. And then we can come in here and we can actually do a summary. And by doing this, we get an objective measure that says our top candidate would be Rihanna out of that list. Same way we do with projects. We want to try to be as objective as possible. And objective means we try to put quantitative data down so we can argue our position. Now what we tend to do, so if we had a sheet like this and there were 4 people on the committee, all of us would put those together and then it would be an average of those values for each one of them. But it gives us an objective way to say, all right, we think Rihanna is going to be our new School of Professional Studies dean. Everybody's like, oh, that would be a shock and a change, wouldn't it? Yeah. So these can be a tool, and hopefully you guys have used them or start to use those skills. This is one of the things employers like to see, is that you can go out and figure out how to do these kinds of quantitative analysis. Now, is there still a subjective piece to it? There always is. There always is. And I will say, trying to hire people, looking at a resume and a half an hour on a Zoom chat, does that always tell you everything you need to know about a person? No. Have we made some spectacularly bad hires, even then they came onto campus and you have one day with them? Have we made some spectacularly bad hires? Probably. In fact, I was off committees for a while, for a little bit after one we hired. But on the other hand, do we also miss people? So the further and better we can refine that, the better we are. Because there's sometimes some people don't interview very well, especially on things like a Zoom. And you have to be aware of that. And some people may come in here and they may be so flustered from traveling or something else, and they have that one day, one shot to try to impress the hiring committee and the people on campus. And we've had interviews on other committees I've been on where faculty loved the person and the students hated him, or vice versa. And it simply was due to a time of the day, perhaps, something in that personality. And so by putting that in there, we can rank all that information. Same way you can do with trying to figure out, get out of the way, which one of these projects you would select, which one of the vendors you would select. We do that. When they have something on campus that requires an RFP, and the last one that I got involved in was actually looking at learning management systems. Blackboard, Canvas, and some of those. That we put criteria together and said, what is the best learning management system for us? Is Blackboard always the best system? No. It's the biggest system in the world right now by volume and users. Does that make it the best? No. But when we put all these criteria together, we've ran into, well, you know what? Canvas, which is what UNL is going to and has moved to, has some interesting advantages. But when you also started looking at costs involved to transition from one platform to another, they're expensive. And so those kinds of details all come out and you start looking at those. So hopefully I can pull some of our old RFPs and you guys can see them, but this is kind of a really quick example. So you are going to do this assignment in your groups, and we are actually going to give you a few minutes today for your groups to get together on it. We'll give you a little bit of time on Thursday for it, and then this one will be due Sunday night at midnight with your group. It should be able to be done, but you can work in your groups. Your other team assignment is due then Tuesday at midnight. I pushed it out a little bit because of the holiday. And then there's one more piece to your assignment that you need to see. Oop, must be above it. It scrambled the order of this a little bit, which was interesting. For your team project, every person involved has to do, in this case, they do a self-evaluation. The next step is going to be an evaluation of your team members, but the first one, I want you to be self-reflective, and I want you to complete this, including what your strengths were as a team member. So I want you to first reflect upon your own successes, your own failures. What could you have done differently in this team? And be honest. Be honest. So this one, I think is worth like 10 points. The group assignment's 20 or 25. So, but I want you to be honest with that. So we'll give you a little bit of time to work on that project. I want to start with the idea of, I want to talk about proposals really quickly. I actually have that up somewhere. I'm not sure why I re-downloaded it, but that's okay. It'll all work. Is I want to look at this idea of proposals. So, part of that I think is significant is this is really dealing with the idea of creating a relationship in a lot of cases. We may not go with the cheapest bidder on a project because we don't have a relationship with them. If I've worked with a partner or a construction firm or a software maker and I have that relationship, I know what to expect. That may be worth some capital or an expenditure. But the other part of that is if I've worked with a vendor and I know that their initial price is a little higher, but they didn't do change orders on a couple things for me, that may well be worth it, because if I bid somebody that's just the lowest bidder, oftentimes those have those hidden surprises in them. And I need to make sure I've checked through those bids and make sure that they're correctly. And it really is trying to create a relationship. If I'm a construction company, do I want further business? Yeah, I would love to keep working with this architect firm because they keep getting bids. They keep putting out construction projects. I would love to create that relationship. So other things that we need to think about. Pricing is obviously a concern for everything we do. But I'm going to suggest that pricing is not the ultimate decision-making tool. Is it important? Yes. Should it be the most important? In fact, what I tend to call the lowest bid is often this term, and you may have heard it somewhere, called least best qualified. Least best qualified. Now, sometimes those bids are low for other reasons. They didn't read the RFP. Maybe they did read that RFP and they read it better than everybody else and figured out a way around some items. But a lot of times there are companies, there are organizations, they are trying to get in the door with that lowest price. And they know that at that lowest price I'm not going to make any money, but if I get change orders, or if I can extend this project out, that can be very effective for them and they can make money. It's not necessarily the way that I would like to do things. So what we're really trying to get is we're trying to get a successful marriage of a project and a contractor, whether it's internal or external. So even projects we do completely in-house, we really want to think about it as this part of this company is doing something for me. So projects tend to have that two-sided, kind of like a lever approach. We also, even inside, we may have contracts. So if I'm GE and I have a construction division, they may well sign a construction contract with the housing department or some other piece. So we have to decide whether these things are worth it. And if we see RFPs, that they're floating out there. And so there's some channels that we'll see them in. They show up in newspapers. They show up in trade journals and different organizations. Just because there's an RFP, we may also not decide to respond to it. We may want to look at it in depth. We may also say, you know what, this is not something that we're interested in pursuing. Peru actually has a problem getting contractors down here because we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if you realize that, but we're not a thriving metropolis. And so we don't get 10 or 12 contractors applying for when we put out an RFP. We get 1 or 2. And sometimes we end up paying a significant amount more, and we have resource difficulties because of our location. It's not like we're working at Lincoln and Omaha where if I need another backhoe, I can rent one and have it there in an hour. We have to plan things out. So we need to think about this idea kind of in steps. So, relationships. Oh man, I took project management and he keeps talking about relationships. Well, it's that idea of how do I make a successful partnership? Because if I'm building a project on campus, I want it done correctly. I also want that vendor to make money on the project. If they don't make money, they're not successful, they're not going to be around for another project. So when we beat each other up over every nickel and dime, that's not always a successful way to do it. And it really is this idea of communication, listening, learning, figuring out what we can do. What can we change about a project to make it more appealing to get vendors down here at Peru, for example? Are there things we can do? Can we do it in terms of scheduling and time? Sometimes these projects go wrong. And usually where they go wrong is either time or money. And how do we correct that? In fact, I can't really think of any major construction projects on our campus that have went at the projected time. And again, some of that is those resources. How do I get those companies to work about it? First appearance and first impression. So if a construction company, and we'll just throw out Samson because they're a construction company that's all over the state and all over the country. If they throw out somebody and he shows up here in a raggedy pair of jeans and an old holy t-shirt, smells like he hasn't bathed in 3 days, that's that first impression. Does that lend itself to making that relationship that you want to do? No. And I know that we harp on those, but I have seen things like that happen before.
Well, say you're Samson, like so you're doing a project for Peru, you bid the first one as a loss, just so you can build a relationship. How many more projects would you bid as a loss?
At a loss, you really would hopefully not bid any at a loss. Would you bid them at a lower cost potential? You might if you think there's a chance for that ongoing relationship.
Well, how many would you do? Like, what's the average of most people do? Like, their third project, they start bidding more.
I would say really on the second or third. Once they've got that relationship established, then they're willing to come out and say, once you have that trust, then I say, all right, this is what I need to make on the project. This is what you guys are willing to pay. Let's meet in the middle and let's come up with that. There are also some tools, and our book doesn't necessarily talk about them in construction projects, that make it more interesting or able to be done. So one of them that we see a lot in construction is something called guaranteed maximum pricing. So if I'm going to build a new building on campus, I might do it as a guaranteed maximum price, and that gives those contractors some flexibility and leeway. And so we say, this project will not cost more than $15 million. Here's our specs. You figure out how to do it at that cost. So sometimes there's some ways to add that in. It's not quite like, so I think I know where you're going from, and the idea is that idea kind of a loss leader at a grocery store, where you walk in and you get the potato chips because they're on sale, but you also grab other things. It really, for a large construction project, they're not going to be willing to take a loss on it. That doesn't make any sense. But they might be willing to bid it closer to their margin. So maybe they typically want to make 12 or 15%, and they would bid it at 8 or 10% maybe. But the flip side of that is they may not be willing to do that because they don't have that relationship established and don't know how that's going to happen or what unsuspecting surprises we're going to have. You know, we also have that trust issue. Ethics are becoming an issue. Ethics are an issue. And whether it's a contractor or whether it's somebody trying to get something done, ethics become very important. Why do we worry about ethics? If I can't trust you, I don't think you're ethical, do I want to work with you? Because if I think, hey, there's a construction crew, I'm not monitoring everything they do. So this building is an example. If they could have probably made more money. I don't think the change orders, when they put some new steel beams in here, they made a lot of money on it. Could they have left that and walked away and probably we wouldn't have noticed it for a couple of years? Yeah. I think that's very possible. So you want those ethics for a lot of reasons. Safety, security. How do I make sure that we're doing the right thing? it's also, say a company, and we'll pick on Samson. I don't know that they've ever had any issues, but using them as an example. Say they're on our campus and they get involved in where they're doing something wrong, stealing construction materials or something else at another project site. Does that reflect badly then upon us because we've already built that relationship and have used them on some projects? We would double think everything we did with them. So it really does become some issue then in terms of how do I get those relationships built? And ethics are important. Ethics are really, really important. We talk about it and we see things that happen every day, some construction company or a business. And I think we have developed a lot of thinking about in our own brains. So when my dad grew up, and I'll throw that back, 86 years old, there was a very much a sense of right and wrong. Now we've kind of marginalized our own ethics in a lot of cases. So, there's $1 on the floor, and I saw it fell out of that guy's pocket a minute ago. If he walks 20 more steps, I'm just going to take that $1 and nobody's going to notice it. I'm at this cash register. Man, we're $20 over for the night. I might just slip that in my pocket. Wow, we're doing a construction project, and hey, this pipe vendor would like to sell us pipe, but it's not really the stuff we need, but he's willing to write me a check for $500. And it's a slippery slope. I think we marginalize some of our ethics. And most of us would say, hey, we're pretty ethical, right? Does anybody in here go, but yet, it's a Sunday night, it's 11:55, you haven't turned in that homework. Let's see if Course Heroes got an answer. It's that same idea of how we marginalize those ethics. And we all do it to a certain degree. But we don't want to do it with a company. And we don't want to see some of those. So we need to make sure that those ethics pieces are in place. And I've worked with some places. I worked with, when I did outside plant telecom, one of the companies we did a lot of work with was AT&T. We've all heard of AT&T. There was a vice president, and I can tell a lot of stories about, no, don't really need names, but the best example was he didn't get email. He had his secretary print email, and she would have to type back a response because he didn't want to do email. More than that, though, he had a little problem with ethics. And he liked to sign off on invoices that didn't actually exist and make up fake companies. He's now in a federal penitentiary for it. Here's a guy making $300,000 to $500,000 probably. But you know what? An extra $5,000, $10,000, let's just make up a company and cheat. And he got caught. And it's that ethical piece. Well, that also tainted, because we did a lot of work, and we worked very hard in our job, the company I worked for and was part of. But we were also, when he got convicted and arrested, it tainted that relationship with us. We did no more work for AT&T at that point. Because the assumption was, well, he was stealing this way. You guys he was signing off on a lot of your stuff. You guys must have been paying him off also. Yikes. And in that case, we weren't. There are some things I can admit to now. I can't admit to on a project in Chicago that we bought some city councilmen new boats. They magically appeared. We had to get a boat. And the boat we needed so we could go under a river and we could monitor it. And they magically arrived in people's driveways. But Chicago as a whole, if you've ever been to Chicago, it's an interesting city. Pizza's great, culture's great. Ethics are on the bottom of the floor. So we want to create that ethical piece. We want to look at that. So let's think about that relationship. Who do we want to work with? What are our clients' needs? So if we're out there as a contractor and we're building highways, the state may be our client. We need to think about what are their needs. What can we do to make ourselves more valuable to that client? In other words, we're putting some way in that we can guarantee to get that contract or a more better effort at getting that contract. And we see an RFP and we say, all right, they want to build some highways. What can we do that makes our contract stand out? We know they're not going to bid only on price. Price is a consideration. maybe we know that the governor is really focused on conservation and recycling. And so our company is also focused on recycling, and we figured out a new way to recycle road material into new road material. See how we could align that with that? Now, we know our governor's not that way right now, right? But as a way of kind of contemplating that. So, we might approach that customer before they even do an RFP and say, hey, these are our services. What can we do to help you? And by doing that, we might align when they issue an RFP a little closer to what we are actually able to offer. So, those do happen. Sometimes that leads to us sending out an unsolicited bid. Hey, we know that you're looking for a new content management system. Here's a bid that we could throw out and try to come in and change things. Now, in a lot of organizations, we have to go through a competitive bidding process. So the state, for example, says you have to go through a formal bidding process above so many, I think it's $50,000. You have to do these steps A, B, and C. But if I'm a private college, if I'm Creighton, do I have to do that? No. So Blackboard could come in and say, hey, we've got these new projects. Come in, give us an unsolicited proposal. And what that often leads to, even if they have to create a proposal or an RFP, is it will match up and say, I want these specs. And those specs strangely look a lot like Blackboard documents. You'll see that if you ever read the newspapers and you see the Highway Patrol or other agencies are bidding for things like police cars. Look at those RFPs because they'll publish them in the paper sometime. And those specs will in some cases rule out one vehicle for another. So when it says you need a 3.5 liter turbocharged engine, like, wait a minute, that is only the Ford Interceptor that has that model. And so sometimes that's how those kinds of things happen. So there's sometimes some bias in there before we ever get to that RFP. Or the other one we see a lot is they're using an existing product. We're using Blackboard. Well, the requirements to bid against it then are, well, you have to have the same feature set because that's what we're used to. And that's what we have in there. So these things are costly to bid into. It's not a, hey, I'm just going to throw something together. It costs time and money to do it. So if I'm going to build a road and I know that I'm going to throw out an RFP and 10 different contractors are going to bid on it, they've all spent a significant amount of time to look through that RFP, to try to answer all the questions. You have to be willing to put some time and effort into it and some money, because time is money. I'm going to pay these employees a significant amount of money. We have some fairly lengthy ones. I think if you dig up the RFP when they developed MyPSC, it was over 700 pages long. So those companies that were bidding for it, it narrows down that field to those companies willing and able to put that kind of time and effort into it. There also is this weird thing in the industries. So in the construction industry, if you bid a lot but you don't ever get a contract, there's going to be some discussion, some scuttlebutt. It's going to be a reputational area. But it's also kind of hard not to, especially if it's in your backyard. Blackboard could have said, you know, this RFP, even though it kind of aligns with our needs, we're not willing to bid on it, and we're not willing to service you. It could happen. You may make that decision to not bid an RFP. You may think there's not any long-term benefit. Yes, I get one road built or one decision made as a company, but if there's not that long-term future, it may not be worthwhile. So you don't see companies from Nebraska saying, hey, there's a road being built in Louisiana, let me run down and bid that real quick. It's just not necessarily feasible for them to do those one-offs. So sometimes you see that as an issue. It may be you don't have the resources to bid something. Maybe you've already got enough contracts for the year that you're already behind. And if you see road construction is kind of weird. Companies bid And they will grab contracts all over the state. And then you'll see they have the cones out and nothing's happening for weeks, right? You've driven by and you go, man, where are those people at? And it's they're trying to shuffle resources to finish one project after another. And part of the reason they do that in our state, you'll see it specifically, is the way our state words things, they can't put in a penalty clause. So even if they don't get it done on the date that they said they would, so hey, September 30th, the Arts Center needs to be done, the Performing Arts Center. But there's no way to put a penalty in there. It kind of makes it a little harder, and so you have to deal with those ideas in there. All right, so in your groups, using whatever tools you have, we'll give you about the next 8 minutes to at least get a start on your proposal contract that you've got in here. So let me get out of here. So in your assignments, it's the big, long, giant document under week 3. So a new manufacturing facility in China. So as a group, now here's one thing I will say though. You do not need to use the same project manager if you would like to choose somebody else for this one. So if somebody else wants to take the lead on this particular assignment, you can do that. But only one of you needs to turn it in, that whoever you have chosen to turn that in. And we'll give you the rest of what we have left of class today then to work on this, or at least get started on it. Do what? Oh, no, I thought you were. So, on Thursday, we're going to finish up chapter 3. We're going to give you a sample off for Project Libre to upload and see if it works on whatever machine you have, kind of that test case. We're going to go I have a couple of videos in there to watch, and I may watch one of them here in class. I think I've got enough time to do that. And we're going to finish up talking about proposals and RFPs. We're going to shove a lot of information in this week, and then we have a couple of assignments due. There is an animation quiz, which should take you about 5 minutes, and then there is a really quick quiz over chapter